떠돌이가 점점 많아지는.
손에 딱 맞는 걸 골라보게. 내 물건은 모두 훌륭한 품질이라고.
To play lutes and flutes.
You'd heard the Nui's Chosen mentioned several times. Marion finally explained what they were. They were apparently warriors who lived in the hereafter, guarding the hereafter gate from attacks by the Crimson Army. The army that had once been led by the god of destruction during the war on Auroria. They were now under the command of the dread god's top advisor and general, Antholon. Mostly consisting of undead, they wanted nothing more than to shatter through the hereafter gate and overtake Nuya the way they'd once overtaken Auroria, completing their conquest of the world. As to exactly who the Nui's Chosen were or why they'd been chosen, Marion had no clue. Iana's memories were equally unenlightening. Perhaps White Arden held the answers.
도돌이가 점점 많아지는
Though their faces looked young, the eyes of the Nui's chosen appeared haunted, as if they'd seen far too much. For his part, Alexander looked like a boy of no more than 20. It seemed impossible he'd been one of Sloane's closest friends. Sloane had been at least 3 times Alexander's age, if not more. At any rate, he'd been able to explain exactly why the Ring of Nui was powerful. Sealing souls in the hereafter, conjuring souls back. Fitting for the goddess of Death's ring. Though based on her memories, Iana had a kind heart. While she'd have gladly helped Flora, you doubted she'd approve of necromancy, especially if it was committed using her artifact. Necromancy seemed extremely widespread in White Arden, as if the forest itself were trapped between this world and the hereafter.
소리가 점점 많아지는군. 경계를 강화해야겠어.
Use carriages for faster travel between.
The Bloodhands had been the real enemies all along. Atalantia's former students had interpreted her teachings incorrectly and grown overly zealous. Because Nui was the goddess of the hereafter, they became obsessed with death and necromancy. They came to despise all other Nuians for not sharing their beliefs and not worshipping Nui the right way, with dark and bloody rituals. Though Atalantia was frustrated and angry, she was too old to rejoin Nui's chosen. They were Auroria's most elite soldiers. As Nui allowed for the exodus from Auroria, these warriors volunteered to stay behind. They pledged to keep enemy forces from following their comrades and destroying their new lives. The hereafter prevented them from aging, and the pledge became an eternal duty. By the time you reached her, Marion was already dead. Malcolm stood over her, gripping a blade, surrounded by other bloodhounds. But you'd watched Malcolm die at your hand. He'd been buried. How was he here? Laughing, he said Sloane was an old fool who worshipped a statue instead of Nui. And Nui's chosen were ineffectual idiots who'd failed to secure victory after centuries. Clearly, he'd never shared in Iana's memories, or he'd have seen how noble the Nui's chosen were. Nui had known them only briefly, but had the utmost respect for them. For the good of everyone, they'd sworn to fight Anthalon for eternity. But Malcolm said it was time for a new breed of hero, the Bloodhounds, and he would lead them. All they needed was the Ring of Nui. Rage welled up inside you, and you threw yourself at Malcolm. Surprised, he dropped the ring. The Bloodhounds were everywhere, attacking you from every angle, but you had eyes only for Malcolm. He'd slain Marion and Sloane, and slandered all the noble Nui's chosen. You would avenge them all, or die trying. If Malcolm refused to die, you'd keep killing him again and again. Eventually, you'd make it stick. A crack of thunder tore through your ears as you defeated him. Lightning snaked across the ceiling. You turned to find the rest of the Bloodhounds dead, and a strange man standing before you. In his hand, he held not a sword, a staff, or a lute, but a flickering bolt of lightning. It had to be Lucius. Grief crumbled his gentle features as he gazed down at Marion's body. Lucius slipped the ring of Nui back onto his finger. You recognized the simple band immediately from Iana's memories. Lucius thanked you for helping him, but you gestured to Marion. She'd wanted to help him, not you. To reward her devotion, if he was such an almighty god, he needed to bring her back to life. Lucius offered a regretful smile and murmured that he didn't have that kind of power. He was no god and didn't want to be. He was only a hero who'd once made a vow to his beloved. It was true that while everyone knew Nui's name, no one called Lucius a god. But then why had Marion wasted so much breath on him? Maybe Malcolm had been right. Maybe Nui's chosen were just ineffectual fools. Lucius laughed. He said there was no need to grieve and no need to hurry. He might be powerless, but he did know someone who could help. He leveled a finger at you. Lucius explained that the magic contained within the golden runes was a pure magic. Unlike necromancy, it wouldn't taint or twist the soul of the person being resurrected. Years ago, Anthalon had faked his own death and pulled back his troops. Thinking the war was finally over, Nui's chosen left the hereafter and re-entered normal life. They arrived on New Year, started families, and took up new careers, finally having the chance to share in what they'd spent so long protecting. Just when their last ounces of fear were replaced by the bliss of life, Anthelon attacked. His forces were fiercer and more deadly than ever. The risk of his breaking through the gate had never been greater. Nui's chosen were forced to abandon their new lives and return to the war. But before leaving, they gave their children a special mark to protect them, a golden rune. You were an heir of the noblest lineage ever to tread the earth. Lucius said the rune was read as Kaidela, which meant love in an ancient language called Ipnish. Back then, drawing the character with your finger had been the equivalent of saying, "I love you." Nui's chosen had picked this symbol to give their offspring. Drawing the magic from their own life forces, Nui's chosen traced the rune on each child. Their children were marked with a love so strong, it could be concentrated into physical form. Malcolm had used his mark on himself. The ultimate selfishness, the ultimate cowardice. Poor Malcolm. He hadn't wasted his death or even his life. He'd wasted love itself. Some Nuyans had been fearful of the special magic the heirs held and kept the truth a secret. Even people like Marion, who knew the heirs were special, could never figure out exactly how. Marion, a good and loyal friend. The golden rune on your arm began to glow brighter and brighter. As its light flared up, your eyes widened. Marion drew a breath. The golden mark vanished from your arm, never to return. Marion awoke with a musical laugh. Your suspicions about her heritage had been correct. She was one of the noble Marions, betrothed to the prince himself. She already knew that as queen, she wanted to lead people back to their rightful place on Aurora. She had suspected the magic of the rune bearers could help. That was why, against Atalantia's advice, she had gone to find them. Lucius returned to the battle he'd been fighting for centuries. Nui's chosen finally understood that their sacrifice was total. Even if the war seemed to end, they could never return to their people. It was too risky. But despite Anthelon, his evil, his destruction, the people they were protecting could return to Aurora, could reclaim the ancient Nuyen lands, the birthlands of Lucius and Iana, and your parents. You felt another of Iana's memories emerge. As the goddess Nui, she just transported the citizens of Aurora to their new home. But the effort was too great, and she was fading away. She implored Lucius to be the people's father, to take care of them. He agreed, promising he wouldn't let them forget their mother's name. You no longer had your golden rune, but you had used it well. And now, you had something even better, a legacy.